Hello and welcome to ESPN FC Live. Mark Donaldson alongside Julien Laurens, alongside Don Hutchison, Mark Ogden and Tim Vickery. Plenty to come today, including the World Cup and South American nations going forward. We're now 10 days after the event, but the South American nations did not perform that well. With Tim joining us, we're going to look at some of the young talent in South America coming through and some transfer speculation. But we're going to start with some news that's broken over the past few hours. And that is the biggest kept secret, Julien Laurens, in football. Wow, what a surprise. Zinedine Zidane is the new head coach of France. You've known about this for a while. It's now official. What are your thoughts, please?
Yeah, you're right. It was the worst kept secret. We've known since March pretty much that he was going to take over from Deschamps after the World Cup. Everybody's very excited here in France. I think Zidane himself is super excited too, because that was the dream, the absolute dream after coaching Real Madrid. Was the next step was the national team. And I'm not even sure if he will do any kind of work after this is over with the national team, because I don't think there's anything in Zidane's eyes that can beat this. And now we just wait for the first games in September to see what the national team will look like, what he will do, if it will be very different to Deschamps or not. But certainly today, as of today, when he was unveiled this morning, he was very, very exciting.
Tim, what kind of French side do you expect under Zidane that may differ from what we saw under Deschamps?
Yes, salut les copains. Remember that both Zidane and Deschamps were forged in Italian football in the late 90s when Serie A was still the main event. So I'm still expecting a dose there of pragmatism from Zidane. Maybe a certain continuity with Deschamps, with perhaps a little bit more charisma and a little bit more flair, which is a worrying prospect from anyone having to face the attacking ability that France can put out. It's almost not fair, isn't it? The amount of talent they've got at their disposal. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what Zidane will do with it.
Don, you played for many teams in many dressing rooms with a lot of egos. Did you find that the bigger the name of the manager, the easier it was to handle the egos in the dressing room?
100%. 100%. When you get a manager like Zidane coming through the door, the players can't question that. They can't question the trophies that he's won. They cannot question the type of player that he was. Julien will probably agree, France's best ever player. So credibility is huge when a manager steps through the door and he delivers that first press conference or he talks to his players behind the scenes. I think I'm like the boys. I think I'm fascinated because when you watch France in this World Cup, they were very, very attacking. So how Zidane adds to that is going to be a fascinating watch.
Looking forward, we'll hear from Zidane in just a second. I just want to get a quick word from Augie. What do you think would be deemed success for Zinedine Zidane in charge of the French national side?
Well, I mean, I'm sure Jules will agree, but has to win. I mean, France are probably alongside Spain, the dominant force in European football right now, dominant force in world football. I mean, 3 successive World Cup finals. They are a team that produces more players than any other European nation. They've got an incredible, pool of talent. So if Zinedine Zidane doesn't win a trophy in his next 4 years out of the Euros or the World Cup, it would be a failure. Now, that's a high standard to set, but like I say, France are the best of the best. It's basically a toss of a coin between them and Spain. So he has to win something, really. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
There was a press conference to introduce him earlier today. He was asked what kind of style can we expect from France under his watch.
Ah ben le style, vous allez le voir bientôt. Enfin, je pense qu'on aura un point presse, ou une conférence de presse pour au mois de septembre et j'expliquerai un petit peu. Je pense que là, on a juste le temps de présenter aujourd'hui cette nomination et puis on aura le temps de parler de tout ça. Mais bon, ce que je peux vous dire, c'est que je suis animé par le jeu. Enfin, j'ai été un numéro 10. Moi, ce qui m'anime, c'est d'aller marquer des buts. Bien sûr, il faut un équilibre d'équipe, c'est forcément, ça c'est plus important, mais ce qui m'anime, c'est le jeu. Voilà. J'ai vécu 25 ans en Espagne, donc vous savez ce que ça veut dire. Donc voilà, j'ai commencé par la France et j'étais, comme je vous ai dit, je suis un numéro 10 et donc moi sur le terrain, j'étais un leader de terrain et aujourd'hui, je vais devenir un leader par mon expérience, par ce que j'ai fait, parce que je crois être maintenant comme entraîneur. Donc voilà, mais vous allez voir ça tranquillement. On va se revoir rapidement. Et ben parce que c'est ce que je voulais faire. C'est-à-dire que une fois que vous avez goûté à l'équipe de France, moi je l'ai connu minime. J'ai fait toutes les catégories. Je suis arrivé à l'équipe A. D'ailleurs, à l'équipe A pour gagner en France à 98, c'est la plus belle chose qui me soit arrivée dans ma vie, c'est de gagner avec les copains de 98, grâce à Aimé et son staff, toutes ces personnes qui ont œuvré à ce qu'on puisse gagner cette Coupe du Monde chez nous en France. Donc voilà, aujourd'hui, j'ai passé ces 4-5 années à attendre ce jour-là. Voilà. Et là, ça devient réalité, donc forcément, je suis un peu ému, mais vous pouvez pas le voir. Hein, je suis tout excité, quoi. C'est quelque chose de fort pour moi aujourd'hui. Donc voilà. Et en même temps, il se passe des choses qui sont compliquées pour beaucoup de gens. Donc voilà. Mais je suis heureux.
He said that he was going to lead through experience, plenty of experience as a player, winner of the World Cup in 1998. Not as much as a manager. However, Jules, Lionel Scaloni proved that you don't need 20 years of experience as a manager to be a good international manager.
Yeah, that's true. Very different to club football. And also Zidane has been at Real Madrid over 2 stints, almost 5 years. I think 5 years at Real Madrid is probably worth far more at any other clubs in the world. So I think he'd be ready. Like he said, it's a long time to wait. We knew he was waiting. We knew, and Deschamps knew himself. And that's also why things between them two have never been great. They were never great when they were teammates. They haven't been great the last few years because Deschamps felt the pressure of Zidane just waiting, being sat on his sofa, playing paddle, waiting for the job to become available. But that's a different story. I think he had some really good moments at Real Madrid. I think he showed some really good aspect away from the man manager and the great man manager that he is, because there was some tactical stuff that made sense too at Real Madrid. But overall, I think there's just, like he said, a lot of excitement. This is L'Equipe's front page today. So the press conference was this morning, and he's back. And really, for us to have Zidane back in any kind of job, really, within French football, within the French Federation, anything, it would have been great. But to see him taking over the national team is a very, very special day.
We've got you for another couple of minutes, Jules. I'm going to stick with you for this one. Deschamps' French side and Zidane's French side. Very, very good, and probably the best squad of players in the world, even although they lost in the World Cup semi-final. Has the best just got better with this appointment?
It's got different. And he said it himself. In the clip that we showed, we didn't put that quote, but he said, we would be different. And he thanked Deschamps for everything that he did over 14 years, which was great. We talked about Tim with the World Cup as well, and Oggy too, during the World Cup in the US. Deschamps, whether we like the football that he played or not, and he was not really our cup of tea, the defensive style and the defensive-minded, how negative and passive they were at times, but he got a lot of great results, semi-final, finals, winning the World Cup, etc. It could have been better, but it was certainly very good in terms of consistency and things like that. Zidane, we don't know yet in terms of result, but like he said himself in that clip we showed, it should be more attacking football. I think the players are very excited because they also know the football will be different. I think a lot of the fans are very excited because they know that too. And us in the media are also excited, not just because it's Zidane, because really on the pitch we should see something quite different than what Deschamps offered. Even if, as Tim said, they were made from the same mold, certainly in terms of their tactical knowledge back in Italy. But then they're different players, different personalities, etc. So we will know in September. He's got some tough games coming up: Turkey, Belgium, Italy, home and away, depending. So we will know very quickly. But I think he will get the best out of that group of players, which is very talented. And I think some new younger player like an Vinicius Junior, for example, will also come through with him because he's also very good with young players.
Another player who's been linked over the past 24 hours with Real Madrid, Vinicius Junior. Oggy, is this a golden age for international managers? We've got Klopp now at Germany, Zidane at France, Tuchel's at England, Ancelotti at Brazil, possibly Pep over the next few years. Is international football sexy again?
Well, it is from the point of view that, like Jules was saying, from a media perspective and a fan perspective, if, I'm sure one of us will be at Jurgen Klopp's first game with the Germans against the Dutch, and same as Zidane in France. It makes it more interesting for us. But I won't say it's a golden age, because I do think that they're all different. I think Klopp and Zidane were kind of in semi-retirement from the club game. I think they both made it clear they had no other objectives in the club game. So this is it's one last job. Whereas, Tuchel and Ancelotti and Pochettino with the US, they'd all been sacked in their last jobs, and they didn't really have anywhere to go. Certainly Tuchel and Pochettino, it was like, well, they were going to have to take a drop from what they were used to stay in the club game. So it was almost like a redemption job for those guys. And Ancelotti, as we know, as well as Poch and Tuchel, had a pretty poor World Cup in terms of meeting their expectations. So I think until Diego Simeone gets the Argentina job, until Luis Enrique goes back into the game, until Pep gets the England job, I don't think we can say that the international game is where it's at. I still think it's the club game. The Champions League is where they want to be, apart from that 2 or 3 weeks in the summer when it's really at the sharp end of the World Cup.
Okay, final question to you, Jules, before you go. The Euro's coming up after the all-important Nations League in September and October. Would it be a failure if France don't win the Euros under Zinedine Zidane? What are the French people saying about that?
Yeah, I think we will see. But he said something when he had the first meeting with the head of the French FA, Philippe Diallo. He said, "Don't worry, President. I know I'm here to win. I know how to win." So I think even himself, Zidane, is putting kind of a lot of pressure on himself that with a squad like this, with a generation like he has, with the players reaching their peak, some of them very soon, if not already there, and for others for the last few years, I think he knows the expectations. You can always say semi-final, and all our countries really say, okay, semi-final is the minimum that we'll be okay with. But all of them want to win it and want to go far. So it should be an interesting Euros for what we mentioned, because we will have clubs Germany and Zidane's France and Tuchel still there, etc., with Spain obviously being the holders and also the World Cup winners. In England, in the UK, should be great. And Zidane has 2 years to get ready for that. And I think what we saw at the World Cup was a really great platform to build on. And he's very much aware of that. He was saying that he's been preparing for the September international break already with his staff, the likes of Fabien Barthez, the former goalkeeper, Bernard Diomed, the former winger, and the guys who were with him at Real Madrid, from David Bettoni, for example, who is his best friend since they were 16 together at the Cannes Academy. All of them, they've been working on things, preparing things. So I really expect him to hit the ground running quickly. And I think we will know soon, really, what his team is made of.
Yeah, we'll find out in September and October. 4 games now with the new international window. Turkey away to begin with, Belgium away, then Italy at home and Belgium at home. Jules, thank you so much. Bon chance, and we will speak to you again soon. Now, to the World Cup, the fallout in South America. I know, Tim, you're jet-setting right now and enjoying a very well-deserved vacation in Europe, but still keeping your ear close to the ground in South America. I want to talk about Argentina now. It's been a couple of weeks since the disappointment of the World Cup final for Argentina and for Scaloni. What's been the fallout? What's been the reaction in the media and in the press in Argentina to the manner of Argentina's final defeat?
Well, they went home to a hero's welcome. And you have to remember that Argentina went from 1993 until 2021 without winning a senior title. And that's 28 years. And that's more than it would be for a European side, because there were so many versions of the Copa America in that time. So 28 years without a senior title, it's almost like dog years. It's a long, long time. And then the Scaloni project, extraordinarily, they appoint someone with no senior coaching experience, starts off very badly, but he gets it all right. And during that 5 years, they won everything. So the abiding sense was one of gratitude to this team. There's also, I think, from many, from some anyway, a sense of denial. There's even been a petition going around calling for the World Cup final to be replayed on the basis that the ref was clearly biased. I think when you look at those statistics, I think you see the depth of the denial of reality there. They don't take losing very well. They're not the greatest losers in the world. I suspect from your question, Mark, you want me to talk about all of the antics and some of the stuff that was going on. And I can tell you in Argentina and in much of South America, it's an absolute and total non-issue. It seems to offend maybe Anglo sensibilities, but certainly the way that, say, Paraguay or Argentina conducted themselves in the World Cup would be seen as using the weapons that you've got in order to go to war. But I think the overriding feeling is one of gratitude to this team and what it's provided over the last 5 years.
I mean, from the outside looking in, Don, it was not a surprise that Argentina did that. That's what they do. That's what they're very good at. It got them to the final. There are 46 other teams that would have swapped places with them to get to the final. So I wanted to do the compare and the contrast from an Argentina perspective, from a South America perspective. As Tim's saying, it's a non-issue there, but it's an issue everywhere else because of the way that they played and the way they set up in the final. Does that tarnish their legacy outside of South America in any way?
No, it wasn't how they performed in game. It was after the game. It was after the final whistle. That's the antics you don't want to see. That's what I found a little bit repulsive after the game. But you have to understand, I think if you're an Argentina fan player, you are very, very emotional. And the emotional side of it got them through to a final because they should have been beaten 3 games ago, well before when Egypt had them beaten, when Cape Verde had a chance of beating them. But their emotion and their heart and their will to win and their desire and their capability to street fight, that's what got them to a final. So you have to credit them for that. They're using, as Tim said, the weapons that they've got to try and get as far in the competition as possible. Now, they probably sat there the night before and they've probably thought, well, how do we out-football this Spain side? And it's impossible. And literally you have the perfect game, you can't out-football Spain because it's in their DNA to take the ball away from any team across Europe and the world. So their only tactic in game, a little bit like the first half an hour of the England game, was to get into their faces and stop the opposition from playing, disrupt the rhythm. In the England game, I thought they played brilliant football. So there's 2 sides to them. It's not just like we've got to paint them with this brush where they're a horrible team and they've got nasty individuals and they'll do anything and above to win. It was more for me the antics after the game, but how they performed in the World Cup, I think they were absolutely brilliant to watch.
Oggy, do you think that the way that they have been portrayed outside of the country has been realistic and has been fair, or has it been over the top from certain countries that might have lost to them along the way?
Is this a Scotsman suggesting talking about a team that lost the semi-final?
We booked holidays for 2 weeks, and it's the group stage. English fans show up for the knockout stage.
I've got a picture of Diego Maradona on my wall from the hand of God moment. So
he's down there as well. Don't worry about that.
Wasn't a handball. What are you talking about?
The wrong person to ask about it. But listen, I think Don's right. I think the situation with Argentina was certainly in the semi-final against England. They won that game because of their qualities, their ability, as Skill only said, to play like 7 or 8 year olds, to play like players that have just got a natural ability and a natural ability to win. They're not, you can see with Argentina, they're not products of academies. They're not taught from a young age to pass sideways and to do so many step overs. They're taught to win. So I think the best of Argentina came out in the semi-final against England, even though they were streetwise in the first half particularly, they were quite rough and tough with England, but England had to deal with it. So no issues with that. But I think Don's right. It was the post-match scenes. It was the Paredes behaviour. It was Molina. It was Roberto Ayala, a coach who's in his 50s. Striking an opponent. That's the issue, because when they lose, like Tim says, they're not the best losers in the world. I think the way they played a certain way because they were scared of Spain, and it was one of those days where Messi couldn't save them. And that's why they played the way they did. It reminded me a lot of the 1990 World Cup final when they lost to West Germany, and they couldn't rely on Maradona that night, and it got nasty and got messy again. But Argentina for me are a great football nation, and I just want to kind of throw it to Tim. Now that Messi's gone, are we going to see a situation where South American football is almost like the dark side of the moon because there's no young players coming through, and this could be Argentina's last chance of a World Cup win for a long time?
There are always young players coming through. The premature move, I think, can be a problem. Let's take, for example, Mastro Antuono going to Real Madrid, and it's not going to work. There isn't the space in the Real Madrid side for him to get a regular game and be important. So some of this talent is being lost along the way. But I do think that these are worrying moments for South American football. And it wasn't just Argentina. And Paraguay got where Paraguay got through grit and determination. Ecuador got through Germany through grit and determination. That's not a long-term strategy. The competition is becoming fiercer. Western Europe is producing. I mean, there are people not being picked in the England squad who would probably get in the Brazil team. I mean, this is extraordinary. And Western Europe is producing talent, and that's also behind their rise of African football as well. So the scenario is looking more and more competitive. And South America, remember how the Nations League is locking the South American national teams out of friendlies with Europe, when the only opportunity to play European opposition in the Qatar 26 cycle was the FIFA dates in March. So that's a problem. So this was a worrying World Cup, I think, for South America. But there will always be talent there, and the margins are sometimes so fine. The margins in the knockout games. And if you think of Brazil's last 3 eliminations, they probably deserve to take Belgium to extra time in 18. They deserve to beat Croatia in 22. And they had the early chances and failed to take them against Norway. So there's always the possibility that with the rub of the green that you need in a knockout tournament, that South America, some of the big South American sides, can go all the way. But the overall scenario, I think, is looking worrying, especially given the fact that so many of the national teams who are doing well now, the FAs, are playing a role in player development. Because if you leave it in South America, if you leave it as it is left just to the clubs, what happens is that the clubs produce to sell. Mm-hmm. And that's different from the needs of the national team. And if I can move to Brazil briefly, Brazilian midfield play has been in crisis for some considerable time. Now that is really, it's more of a Brazilian dynamic than a European dynamic. And people were talking about this in the mid-80s, before the global market had really opened up. It's got a lot to do with lack of security for coaches. So what do? If there's no job security, you just make sure that you don't lose. So the central midfielder, he became much more of a destructive figure than the constructive figure of old. And Gigi was the best player of the 1958 World Cup. Just a Mark Gerson in 1970, the fellows from 82. That kind of player Brazil has been struggling to produce. And the example of Jorginho, if you remember him from Napoli and the Premier League with Chelsea and with Arsenal, and he had to move abroad because no one was looking to develop that kind of midfielder in Brazil. He's not athletic enough, doesn't win the ball enough, doesn't tackle enough. I remember years ago seeing a lecture from for a conference of coaches in Brazil from the director of the Barcelona Youth Academy, La Masia. And he was emphasizing that right from the start, all the way to Barcelona B team, results are not really particularly important to them. It's all about developing players. I remember the fellow who was coaching Brazil at the time got up and he said, we can't be like that. It's all about results all of the time. And a lot of Brazil's youth sides, they've been dreadful. The centre-backs are just giants, physically imposing. They'll score your goals from set pieces, but they can't play very much. And you see this reproduced because what's happening here is coaches looking to preserve their own job by winning in the short term to the detriment of the long-term development of players. And now that other nations all around the world are taking this so seriously and doing better, that I think is worrying for South America, which I think will have to adapt or fall behind.
Tim, I'm glad you took us down this route of conversation because it's been a question I've been wanting to ask you for a long time regarding Brazilian football. When I grew up, I fell in love with the likes of Adair and Zico, Falcao, Socrates and the like. Has the Brazilian FA or the culture gone a little bit European with trying to play the biggest, the fastest? We were on the other day, me and Mark and Oggy, we were talking about Italian football and the lack of number 10s, the lack of Baggios and Del Pieros. Now, these kids, they're at school at the moment. These Ronaldinhos and these Adair and Zicos, they're at school at the moment. How do they sort of get fast-tracked into being Brazilian footballers again and going back to that DNA and that culture without just trying to revert back to, well, we've got to win yesterday. So why don't we look for the biggest and the fastest in the playground?
Two developments that I'll take you through. One is that where are the clubs getting most money from selling players? Wingers. And Brazil have got more wide strikers than they know what to do with. So that fella who in the past might have been a 10, might have played through the midfield, put him out on the wing as a wide striker. There is space in Brazilian football because, and it is changing. The domestic game is getting better in Brazil, but there's still more space. The defensive line's a little bit deeper, so the wide striker has time and space to make an impact, and then you can sell him for money. So skillful players are being pushed out into wide positions. But the other is a change that's happening in football worldwide, which I think has affected Brazil quite a lot. If you think of the original Ronaldo, the Brazilian Ronaldo, R9, he's in some ways the last of the Mohicans because he was an absolutely normal kid, normal working class Rio upbringing until he's like 15, 16. And then he suddenly, almost overnight, he becomes a global star. Subsequently, they're being hothoused. They're all little business projects. So they've often got Neymar is like the pioneer of this. You know, they've got fathers behind them who are hothousing them from the age of 7 and so on. And sometimes the family will stop work. The extended family will stop work and just become a support structure to this young kid who's supposed to carry the economic hopes of his entire family. And you can't really grow up normal in that environment. I was hearing about someone who knows Vinny and that generation quite well, and he was saying, you know, they're not allowed to play street football anymore. They're not allowed because they're in the club system from they're like 7 or 8, and the clubs are worried about getting injured just playing on the streets. And so they have to watch their mates play. They're not allowed to join in. And I think that's really, really sad. And maybe that has done something to take away the sense of joy that and I grew up on 82, Don, you know, rushing home from school to see Brazil 82. And it felt like something had gone wrong with nature when they got knocked out. It was so great. And it hasn't been that great subsequently. And it hasn't been that joyful subsequently. And if you're growing up from the age of like 10 or something with this economic burden of supporting your family, I think that squeezes some of the joy out of it.
Yeah. Looking at the topic bar about the future of Ancelotti and Neymar. Neymar is now retired from international football. Ancelotti...
Not necessarily. I wouldn't... Well, you know, Brazil is still tearing itself up over the Neymar issue. And, you know, there are still people saying to him, go on, you can do it. You can do it in 2030. For as incredible as that might seem, as bizarre as that might seem, given the physical condition of the player that we saw in the World Cup, this debate goes on and on and on. And we talked earlier on about elite coaches, and I'm still trying to process what happened. The two outside coaches who come in because of game management are the coaches who seem to have made the worst substitutions. And what Ancelotti did to his side when he brought on, it's not just he brought on Neymar, but the way that he restructured his side in the wake of bringing on Neymar, just threw the game away. But there are those saying, well, the problem was that we didn't use Neymar enough. Neymar himself, I think he's liked a post on social media saying that he should have started the game. So this debate is going to rage and rage and rage, and Ancelotti, and he hasn't fronted up yet. He hasn't gone back to Brazil afterwards, but that's going to be fascinating because he's now open to a level of pressure from a nation of over 200 million that I don't think he's ever had before, and it was a pretty old side that he took. He went big on experience,
yes,
and he came in without a lot of time to do much. So we understand that. And this is a side now that needs a lot of rebuilding, I think. And you never really think of Ancelotti as... You think of Ancelotti as more as someone who comes along with a Band-Aid and not as someone who's capable of performing extensive surgery. And they do kind of need extensive surgery. And you think, is he the man to do that? Does he think he's the man to do that? And the next 4 years, as I said, with South America being shut out by Europe with the Nations League, it's a very confusing time in South American football. There's a Copa America coming up in 2 years. We don't know where that's going to be yet. World Cup qualification with Argentina, Uruguay and Paraguay qualifying automatically. We don't know what the format of that is going to be yet. So it's a very uncertain future. And I think the big question hanging over Brazil now is Ancelotti the right man in these circumstances to build a side from scratch? Because it's not really part of his CV, is it?
No, and you spoke about how it was an older Brazil squad. Ryan and also Endrick, 19 and 20 years old, were the only two players in that squad under the age of 25. Look, we could speak all day about Brazil and South American football with Tim. I just want to pivot slightly before we end with South American transfer speculation and more players potentially moving to Europe with you, Augie. Infantino's supposedly got a plan. He's going to maybe sell off part of the World Cup. What on earth have we woken up to today? And what have you written about for ESPN.com?
Well, it's a moving story, this, because UEFA have only issued a statement about half an hour ago, just hitting back at the plan. And the plan is apparently Infantino and FIFA are looking to sell off some, if not all, of the World Cup. And what that means is to wealthy investors who will run the company, run the World Cup, and then decide how often it's played, how many teams are involved, and a little bit like the F1 situation where it's now owned by private equity. And what it would mean is that there'd be a massive influx of money initially to FIFA, which they would then distribute to all of their 211 nations. Now, let's say £25 million to the English FA might not. It's a big money, obviously. But if you're talking that to the New Caledonia FA or the Tahiti FA, it's a different matter altogether. So the way this would get through is that these smaller nations would see this as a massive win for them and then give it the okay. So FIFA have issued a statement subsequently saying that they've got a plan to grow the game and it's a massive injection coming, but they haven't talked about the detail of, potentially selling it to private investors. Donald Trump has been mentioned. His associates have been mentioned. That hasn't been mentioned in the FIFA release, obviously. So it's, like I say, it's a moving story. It feels a little bit like the Super League proposals 5 or 6 years ago, which, lasted about a week before it was kind of driven into the ground. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. But obviously right now, UEFA are very hostile to it. And I think this could be a situation where Infantino, if he's not careful, this could be an element of overreach, which could actually put him into more trouble in terms of re-election. Obviously, he's unopposed right now in terms of being re-elected next year, but it's creating a lot of enemies within the game. Mm-hmm. And if UEFA as a bloc, that's 55 nations decide to go against him, it only takes, a bit more politicking around the world to make it very difficult for Infantino. So this could be a case of, one big idea too many, I think, for FIFA and Infantino.
Yeah, the quote from UEFA: "This crosses a line that football's governing institutions should never cross. None of us are the owners of football. The World Cup is not FIFA's to sell." Stay tuned to ESPN.com. This is a moving story that just broke earlier today. We're going to end today with some transfer speculation. We'll get to Vinny Jr. in just a second and what on earth is going on there. Is it just a ploy to get him more money to stay at Real Madrid? But what about some of the players that might be leaving South America? All those wingers, Tim, coming to Europe. What are you hearing about potential moves for players in the Brasileirão potentially coming across to Europe?
Well, most of them are already there, and it's astonishing now the age. They're almost ripped out of the womb by the European clubs. It's something that can go right, but it can also go radically, radically wrong. And if you think, say, Don, an 18-year-old footballer can be immature for an 18-year-old, because focused on the game so much. They're not going out and doing the stupid things like stealing traffic cones and taking them home. That is a kind of rite of passage.
That was the glory days. That was the glory days.
So an 18-year-old completing his transition from adolescence to adult in a foreign culture where he doesn't speak the language, there's obviously going to be times when that goes wrong. But that's the way that the market has gone. So with the exception of Ecuador, there were pretty old squads that the South American sides took to this World Cup. You mentioned there are only 2 Brazilians under 25, and the youngest Uruguayan was Pelistri, who's 24 going on 25. Argentina, well, there's Nico Paz, who's Europe-born, and Valentin Barco, who's been there for a while as well. So a lot of that talent has already gone. It's already there. Probably the biggest one that could move in the next couple of weeks is the former Nottingham Forest midfielder, Danilo Santos, as he became. Left-footed, great engine, very versatile. 4 substitute appearances for Brazil in the course of the World Cup. I think he was probably hoping to be involved a little bit more and give himself a platform. Suffered the injury with Forest, came back to Botafogo in Brazil. Botafogo can't afford to keep him. He will definitely be moving on. The big Brazilian giants, Flamengo and Palmeiras, they would both take him, but he would want probably a Premier League club that's in the Champions League. That is where he would want to go. There's been talk of Botafogo wanting to send him to Zenit in Russia and then getting the winger Luis Enrique back from there. But I don't think Daniel dos Santos will want that. So that's probably the biggest one in South America to look for at the moment, simply because anyone else who has shown much talent is already there.
Vinny Jr., what are you hearing about that, Tim? And how on earth did that end up with an Arsenal link with a new contract potentially on the horizon at Real Madrid?
Well, I think this is a possibility. I mean, there's a number of reasons why we think this could happen. One is, remember the old Alex Ferguson thing at United? When you win the league, that's the time to buy. Sometimes when he comes second, he wouldn't invest. He would show faith in what he had. It's great when you win to buy, because it just when you win and you go out and buy, because it just freshens things up. We're not resting on our laurels. Onwards and upwards we go. From a Vinny perspective, well, there's 1 year left on his contract. He can go in a year's time for free. So Real Madrid, could they cash in now? Would that make sense because there aren't that many clubs who could afford him. Arsenal would be one of them, and Madrid, well, they made a problem for themselves, didn't they, when they brought in Mbappe? It's a problem both tactically and of egos. In terms of the tactics, Vinny is a left winger who wants to cut in, and Mbappe, the space that he most likes, he likes dropping and drifting wide on the left there to cut in. So you've got two key players who both really want the same space. And also you've got the thing there that Vinny won 2 Champions Leagues for Real. And then, so he's entitled to think I'm king of the hill. And then Mbappe comes in and he is obviously given king of the hill status. Can anyone make that work? Ancelotti couldn't make that work. No one has been able to make it work subsequently. So you can see reasons that make this feasible. Whether he would see this as a step downwards to leave Real Madrid, it would be, I think, the first genuine top-ranked Brazilian superstar to go to the Premier League. Estevan could well develop into that, and it's interesting that the Premier League managed to seduce Estevan. Had he been fit, maybe Brazil's campaign would have been different, because he had been shaping up as the main man in Ancelotti's team. But it'd be a huge feather in the Premier League's cap to bring in the biggest star in the Brazilian national team at the moment. And I can see a few reasons why it is at least possible. It's getting quite good traction in Brazil. There are a lot of Arsenal fans in Brazil. They got into the Premier League just at the time when Arsenal were, strangely to someone whose sympathies lie at the other end of the Seven Sisters Road, when Arsenal were exciting and glamorous. So it would go down pretty well, I think, in Brazil for him to make that move. So at this moment in time, and I'm aware that my learned friends are closer to this one and may have more of an inside track, but I wouldn't rule it out.
I think that the reality of this is that this is no longer a football story or football issue. It's about egos, and it's about Florentino Perez, the Real Madrid president. He doesn't want to be seen as being backed into a corner by Vinny Jr. and Vinny Jr.'s people. Equally, Vinny Jr. has an ego as well. He doesn't want to be seen as, like you said, Tim, not only second to Kylian Mbappe in the pecking order, but to Jude Bellingham as well. That, Real's 3 superstars went to the World Cup this summer. 2 came back with their reputations enhanced, and Vinny came back with his reputation the same as it was, really, maybe diminished a little bit, having had a good but not a great World Cup for Brazil. So 2 people that want to come out of this as winners. Vinny, I don't think really wants to go to Arsenal, the Premier League. I think he wants to stay at Real Madrid. I think he wants to be a top dog there, like you say. I don't think Perez wants to sell him, but equally, if these two kind of egos clash, then there's going to be one loser and one winner. And I'm not quite sure at this stage who it's going to be. But ultimately, I don't think Arsenal can afford this deal. I think that there's a lot of figures being banded around about Vinny's wages, around £400,000 a week. Well, he's out of contract in a year's time. So when he's out of contract as a free agent, he could command twice that, maybe even £1 million a week. Arsenal aren't going to pay anything like that. Real Madrid won't pay that, but they'll get more at Real with his image rights, etc. So there's a lot of kind of complications in this. But I saw what Don said about 4 or 5 days ago when it started. This, to me, smacks of Vinny Jr. wanting to get a better contract out of Real Madrid, wanting to strengthen his position at Real Madrid, wanting a bit of love. And if Arsenal are being used as a tool to get that, fair enough. And also Arsenal, by the way, are getting plenty of kind of positivity out of this as well, because it makes them look like a club that's ready to be very ambitious. They're challenging for one of Brazil's best players. this is a transfer that is going to shock everybody. So even if they don't get it, they've been linked with him. So everybody wins. But I still think at the end of the day, Vinny will stay at Real Madrid, whether the new contracts or not. But I don't think he'll go this summer.
Going to end with one more. I want to start with you, Don, and then Tim, you can pick up after Don's answer. It's to do with Endrick, one of the plethora of Brazilian wingers that they are producing. He had his loan spell last year at Lyon. Do you think it's probably beneficial from his perspective and for Real Madrid and the Brazil national team, Don, if he was to move away on loan again? Roma, someone you cover in Serie A, have been strongly linked with him.
Yeah, I think off the back of the conversations with Vinny Jr., I think it's a case of Jose Mourinho sitting down with the players and looking them in the eye and asking them and demanding what he wants from them. And if Endrick doesn't want to play wide, he wants to play through the middle, then obviously he's got a problem unless Jose sees him as a number 9. I think you've got to be very careful. I think as a young player, when you make the move to the likes of Real Madrid, and you have to make that move, you've got to make the move. You've got to back yourself. You've got to believe in your own ability. The difficulty is when you start getting shipped out on loan here, there, and everywhere, you become a little bit of a nomad. And it's not so much about getting forgotten. It's trying to nail down a regular place because, you know, you're a young lad. You're trying to make your way in life, never mind trying to play for the likes of Real Madrid. So you're trying to forge these relationships with your teammates. You're trying to find yourself as a person. You're trying to find yourself as a player. You're playing in different positions, which is hard, especially in a dressing room like Real Madrid, where it's very political. So you haven't really got a say, especially when you're young. You haven't really got an opinion. So I think it's a case of Jose sitting down with Vinny Jr. and I think Endrick and saying, listen, this is what I demand. Are you willing to do it? You might be on the bench every now and again. Are you going to be happy with that? Would you benefit if you're Endrick going on loan to Roma for a year? Absolutely. Go and play in Serie A, but make sure you churn out the games. But then I think at some point when you hit an age and when you hit a number where you've got your appearances behind you, you then have to settle down and churn out 25, 30 games a year. That's more beneficial for you as a player. The
big problem with this, Tim, seems to be that Endrick's representatives don't really have much of an interest, according to reports, in him going out on loan again just because of what Don said.
Indeed, yeah. Although did very well on loan. On and off the field. I mean, he knuckled down and learnt French very, very quickly. He's quite an impressive young man. You know, I think he will take positive things from all of this experience, that the people that he's played with. But there are a number of problems here, isn't it? One is that he went to a club that, frankly, didn't need him. You know, Madrid, he came exactly the moment that Real Madrid was signing Mbappe. So you think, well, where's he going to fit in? And the other, and I think Don alluded to this, is what is he? We're still at a stage in his career where you don't know exactly what he is. And he certainly wouldn't see himself as a wide striker. Is he a number 9? Does he play just behind the main striker? And it's hard, I think, for, you know, in the days when we grew up, everything was like 4-4-2. And you had your Toshak and you had your Keegan, and you knew where everyone fitted. With the systems that they use today, for that type of striker, I think it's harder to find a place. I think of, say, Brazil when they won the World Cup in 1994. It was Bebeto, Romário up front with Bebeto. What would Bebeto be nowadays? You know, he's just made for the second striker in a 4-4-2. When you come away from those, where do you fit him in? And I think Endrick's going through some of those problems of what exactly is he? Because at some point as a footballer, I think you must define yourself. What do I do best? What is my function?
Really enjoyed that today. Thank you for your time. And if you've got anybody in the closet that's thought, oh, I thought this was only going to be half an hour, then they can come out right now. Thanks to Augie. Thanks to Jules, who joined us at the start about Zinedine Zidane. Thanks to Hutch. And to Tim. We'll speak to you again soon. Bye for now.